Have you ever felt that strange sense, that uncanny feeling, that your deepest thoughts aren't entirely your own? That moment when an idea seems to arrive from nowhere, as if it were whispered to you from some distant corner of existence. It's that fleeting suspicion that your consciousness might be connected to something far greater than yourself. Look around you. The universe, vast, seemingly impersonal, stretching across unimaginable distances, and yet, here you are, contemplating it. A universe that has, against all probability, produced a being capable of contemplating itself. Is this merely coincidence? Or is there something more profound happening? Something that powerful institutions and conventional thinking have carefully diverted our attention from? What if the boundary between your mind and the cosmos isn't what you've been led to believe? What if that boundary is more permeable, perhaps even illusory? Friedrich Nietzsche, one of history's most penetrating philosophical minds, uncovered something remarkable about this relationship that challenges everything we think we know about consciousness, creativity, and our place in the cosmos. The answer isn't what you might expect. It's both simpler and more profound. It suggests that when you think, when you create, when you question, you're not acting alone. You're participating in something far more extraordinary, the universe itself achieving consciousness through you. This isn't mystical speculation or New Age fantasy. It's a startling conclusion drawn from rigorous philosophical investigation, one that Nietzsche himself arrived at through years of painstaking study and personal revelation. And it's a conclusion that has been systematically obscured, not because it's false, but because of how deeply it threatens established power structures that rely on human separation and isolation. Consider this. Have you ever wondered why you can comprehend the laws of physics? Why mathematics, a human creation, so perfectly describes cosmic reality? Why your mind can grasp the concept of billions of years or light years when your body experiences neither? There's a reason for this strange correspondence, and it's hiding in plain sight. What would it mean for you, for all of us, if we aren't merely observers of the universe, but the very means through which the universe observes itself? What changes when you realize that your thoughts might be the cosmos thinking? There's an unexamined contradiction that sits at the very heart of how we understand ourselves and our relationship to the cosmos. We've become accustomed to thinking of human consciousness as something separate from the universe, as if we stand apart from nature, observing it from the outside. Science reinforces this separation. The observer and the observed, the subjective and the objective, the human mind and the cosmic order. And yet, this division makes less and less sense the more closely we examine it. Consider the strange fact that the human brain, a 3-pound organ evolved on a small planet, can somehow comprehend the behavior of black holes, the origins of time, and the dance of quantum particles. How is it that a product of the universe is so perfectly tuned to understand the universe itself? This isn't a coincidence. It's an anomaly that demands explanation. Look at the evidence hiding in plain sight. The elements in your body, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, were forged in the hearts of dying stars. The atoms that make up your neurons once drifted through cosmic dust clouds. The electrical impulses that form your thoughts obey the same fundamental laws that govern distant galaxies. You are, in the most literal sense, the universe in human form. This realization troubled the greatest minds of the 19th century as the implications of Darwinian evolution and thermodynamics were unfolding. If humans are entirely natural beings, products of the same cosmic processes that created mountains and microbes, then our consciousness too must be a natural phenomenon, not separate from the universe, but an expression of it. Friedrich Nietzsche recognized this contradiction more clearly than most. He saw that Western thought had created an artificial division, what he would later call the greatest error, between human beings and the natural world. This division served certain religious and political interests, but it fundamentally misrepresented reality. The evidence for this cosmic connection appears in unexpected places. Consider the striking parallel between neural networks in the human brain and the cosmic web of galaxies. Researchers at the University of Bologna noted that the mathematical structure of neuronal connections bears an uncanny resemblance to the largest structures in the observable universe. The same patterns repeat across vastly different scales, from neurons to galaxies. Or consider the fact that human mathematics, a product of our minds, somehow predicts the behavior of distant stars and subatomic particles with astonishing accuracy. As physicist Eugene Wigner noted, this is the unreasonable effectiveness of mathematics in the natural sciences. Why should the constructs of human thought align so perfectly with physical reality unless there's some deeper connection? Perhaps most telling is the fact that human consciousness can contemplate its own origins, that the universe, through us, has developed the capacity to study itself. As physicist Carl Sagan put it, we are a way for the cosmos to know itself. This isn't poetic license. It's a literal description of what's happening when a human being studies astronomy or physics. This anomaly sits before us, largely unacknowledged. What if consciousness isn't an accident or a side effect of evolution, but something more fundamental to the cosmos itself? What if our thoughts aren't merely about the universe, but are, in some sense, the universe thinking? The implications of this question are profound, and as we'll see, Nietzsche's investigation of this mystery led him to conclusions that powerful institutions had every reason to suppress. I wonder, have you ever felt that your deepest insights weren't entirely yours? That they came through you rather than from you? There might be a cosmic reason for that feeling. To understand how Nietzsche unraveled this cosmic mystery, we need to understand the man himself, not the caricature that's often presented, but the flesh and blood human being whose life experiences prepared him to see what others missed. Friedrich Nietzsche was born in 1844 in the small town of Rücken, Prussia. His father, a Lutheran pastor, died when Friedrich was only 4 years old. This early encounter with mortality left a profound mark on the young boy, who would later write that, when gods die, they always die many kinds of death. This early loss gave Nietzsche an unusual relationship with the cosmos from the beginning. Without the steady presence of his father, young Friedrich developed a habit of looking to the night sky, sensing a connection to something larger than himself. In his personal journals, many of which remained unpublished until long after his death, he described feeling dissolved into the stars during these childhood contemplations. As a student, Nietzsche showed brilliant promise. By age 24, he had become the youngest person ever appointed to a chair of classical philology at the University of Basel. His specialty was the ancient Greeks, particularly the pre-Socratics, who didn't separate human consciousness from cosmic processes the way later philosophers would. But Nietzsche's academic career was cut short by debilitating health problems, violent migraines, nausea, and failing eyesight that left him unable to read for more than 20 minutes at a time. Forced to resign his professorship, he spent the next decade wandering through the mountains of Switzerland and Italy, living in small rented rooms, thinking and writing in solitude. This isolation proved crucial. Removed from academic pressures and conventional thinking, Nietzsche developed a unique perspective. His physical suffering, too, played a role. During his migraines, which could last for days, he experienced altered states of consciousness that gave him insights into the nature of perception and reality. In a particularly revealing note from 1881, written during a stay in Sils Maria, Switzerland, Nietzsche described an experience that changed everything for him. I was sitting by the lake, and beyond a nearby village rose a round tower against the sky. It was about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Suddenly I felt myself dissolving into the light, as if the boundary between myself and the cosmos had temporarily vanished. This wasn't mere poetic sentiment. Nietzsche had experienced what neuroscientists now recognize as a dissolution of the self-model in the brain, a temporary breakdown of the cognitive boundary between self and world. Similar experiences have been reported by astronauts gazing at Earth from space, who describe a profound shift in perspective called the overview effect. What made Nietzsche remarkable was his ability to analyze these experiences philosophically, rather than merely describing them. He recognized that these moments weren't aberrations or illusions, but glimpses of a deeper truth, that the separation between human consciousness and the cosmos is less absolute than we normally perceive. This insight informed his most profound work. In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Nietzsche wrote, "I am the cause and effect of my destiny, passing and returning eternally." This wasn't mystical nonsense, but a recognition that human consciousness isn't merely situated within the cosmic order. it's an expression of it. By 1883, Nietzsche had developed a comprehensive understanding of how human thought relates to cosmic processes. In unpublished notes that would later be compiled in The Will to Power, he wrote, "The development of consciousness is not separate from cosmic evolution, but its continuation by other means. When we think, it is not merely us thinking, but the universe achieving self-awareness through us." This was the key that would unlock the mystery, a key that Nietzsche was uniquely positioned to discover due to his classical education, his personal experiences of altered consciousness, and his willingness to challenge the dominant intellectual frameworks of his time. What might you discover if you began to see your own thoughts not as separate from the cosmos, but as the cosmos thinking through you? How might that shift your understanding of what it means to be human? Nietzsche's investigation began with a straightforward observation. Human beings are natural entities, products of the same evolutionary processes that created all life on Earth. If this is true, then our cognitive capacities, including consciousness itself, must be natural phenomena as well. Not supernatural gifts bestowed from outside nature, but capacities that emerged from within the natural world. This seems obvious today, but in Nietzsche's time, it represented a radical break from traditional Western thought, which had long insisted on a fundamental separation between mind and nature. Descartes had famously divided reality into two substances, res cogitans, thinking substance, and res extensa, extended substance, mind and matter. This dualism permeated Western philosophy and religion, creating an artificial barrier between human consciousness and the natural world. Nietzsche saw through this illusion. In Human All Too Human, published in 1878, he wrote, "Everything that we need, and that could be given us in the present state of the development of the sciences, is a chemistry of the moral, religious, aesthetic ideas and feelings, as well as of those emotions which we experience in the large and small transactions of culture and society, and even in solitude. But what if this chemistry should end with the conclusion that in this domain too, the most magnificent colors are derived from base, indeed from despised materials? Would many be inclined to pursue such examinations? Mankind loves to put the questions of origins and beginnings out of mind. Must one not be almost inhuman to detect in himself a contrary inclination?" With this passage, Nietzsche was suggesting something profound, that our highest thoughts and feelings, the very stuff of consciousness, arise from the same natural processes that govern all matter. The chemistry of consciousness isn't separate from the chemistry of stars and stones. But Nietzsche went further. If consciousness is a natural phenomenon, then it must have evolved for natural reasons. In Daybreak, 1881, he speculated that consciousness developed not as a way to perceive objective truth, but as a social tool, a means of communication between human beings. This insight anticipated modern neuroscience by nearly a century. Recent research confirms Nietzsche's intuition. The social brain hypothesis, developed by anthropologist Robin Dunbar, suggests that human intelligence evolved primarily to navigate complex social relationships. Our large brains and advanced cognitive capacities didn't emerge to contemplate the cosmos, but to keep track of who was doing what, with whom, in our ancestral groups. And yet, and this is the crucial point, these same cognitive capacities now allow us to comprehend quantum physics, imagine the Big Bang, and contemplate our place in the universe. The tools that evolved for social interaction somehow grant us access to cosmic truths. How can this be? The answer lies in a principle that Nietzsche understood intuitively, that nature doesn't create entirely new mechanisms when it can repurpose existing ones. The same neural networks that evolved to model social relationships can be redirected to model the behavior of stars or subatomic particles. The brain that evolved to navigate human society can, with training, navigate the conceptual landscape of cosmology or quantum mechanics. This explains the otherwise mysterious fact that human mathematics, developed initially for practical purposes like counting and measuring, turns out to describe the fundamental behavior of the cosmos with extraordinary precision. As physicist Richard Feynman noted, "I think nature's imagination is so much greater than man's. She's never going to let us relax." But there's something even more remarkable here. The brain that contemplates the cosmos is itself composed of atoms forged in ancient stars. The consciousness that wonders about the origin of the universe is made of the same fundamental particles that were present at the Big Bang. We are not separate observers of cosmic processes. We are those processes achieving self-awareness. Nietzsche captured this insight in a note from 1883. The thinking mind is not separate from that which it thinks about. It is that which it thinks about, achieving consciousness of itself. This isn't mysticism. It's a logical conclusion from the premise that consciousness is a natural phenomenon. Consider the implications. If your consciousness is not separate from the cosmos but an expression of it, then in a very real sense, when you think about the universe is thinking about itself through you. Your quest to understand reality isn't merely a personal journey. It's the cosmos achieving self-understanding through a particular human form. This insight appears throughout human history in different guises, from Heraclitus's "nature loves to hide" to the Upanishadic "tat tvam asi," that thou art. But Nietzsche approached it not as mystical doctrine, but as the logical conclusion of naturalism taken to its full extent. The evidence was there, hidden in plain sight, but recognizing it required breaking free from the artificial division between mind and nature that had dominated Western thought for centuries. Nietzsche's great contribution was to see that this division was not just philosophically unsound, but actively prevented us from understanding our true relationship to the cosmos. Have you ever considered that your curiosity about the universe might not be merely a personal interest, but the universe's way of investigating itself? What might change in your understanding if you took this possibility seriously? As Nietzsche delved deeper into this cosmic connection, he realized that the implications extended far beyond abstract philosophy. If human consciousness is the universe achieving self-awareness, then our creative acts take on a profound new significance. Consider artistic creation. When a composer arranges notes into a symphony, or a poet crafts a verse, we typically view this as a purely human activity, something separate from natural processes. But Nietzsche challenged this assumption. In The Gay Science, 1882, he wrote, "We who think and feel at the same time are those who really continually fashion something that had not been there before. The whole eternally growing world of valuations, colors, weights, perspectives, scales, affirmations, and negations." What Nietzsche is suggesting here is revolutionary. Human creativity isn't separate from cosmic creativity, but its continuation in a new form. When we create art, music, literature, or scientific theories, we're not acting against nature or apart from it. We're nature evolving new forms of expression through us. This insight appears in Nietzsche's private correspondence as well. In a letter to his friend Franz Overbeck dated July 1883, he wrote, "Sometimes I feel as though I'm not creating my work but merely discovering what already exists in some potential form. The universe speaks through us when we create, if only we could learn to listen." Modern neuroscience offers intriguing support for this perspective. Studies of creative cognition show that breakthrough ideas often emerge during periods of reduced conscious control, what scientists call transient hypofrontality, when the brain's executive function temporarily steps back. Many artists and scientists report that their most significant insights arrive not through conscious effort but as unexpected gifts, as though received rather than generated. Nobel Prize-winning physicist Richard Feynman described his creative process this way: "You have to keep a dozen of your favorite problems constantly present in your mind, although by and large, they will lay in a dormant state. Every time you hear or read a new trick or a new result, test it against each of your 12 problems to see whether it helps. Every once in a while there will be a hit, and people will say, 'How did he do it? He must be a genius.' What Feynman is describing isn't genius in the conventional sense, but a receptivity to connections that already exist in the fabric of reality. The physicist doesn't invent the laws of nature, he discovers them. The mathematician doesn't create mathematical truths, she uncovers relationships that were already there." Nietzsche extended this insight beyond art and science to all forms of human thought. In his view, even our most ordinary thoughts participate in cosmic processes. When we contemplate our lives, make decisions, or imagine possibilities, we're not standing apart from nature, but are nature contemplating itself through a particular human form. This perspective resolves another paradox that troubled philosophers in Nietzsche's time. How can thoughts, seemingly immaterial and subjective, have any relationship to the physical world? The traditional answer was dualism, the notion that mind and matter are different substances. But this created more problems than it solved, particularly the mystery of how these substances could interact. Nietzsche offered a more elegant solution. Thoughts aren't separate from physical processes. They're physical processes achieving a particular form of organization and self-reference. Your consciousness isn't something added to the physical universe. It's the universe organized in such a way that it can reflect on itself. This insight anticipates modern theories of consciousness, like integrated information theory, which suggests that consciousness emerges when physical systems achieve certain patterns of information integration. As neuroscientist Christoph Koch puts it, consciousness is a fundamental property of the universe, not unlike mass or electrical charge. Nietzsche expressed a similar idea in more poetic terms. In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, he wrote, "And this most honest existence, the ego, it speaks of the body, and it still wants the body, even when it poetizes and raves and flutters with broken wings. It learns to speak ever more honestly, this ego, and the more it learns, the more words and honors it finds for body and earth." What Nietzsche recognized was that the honest ego, the conscious self, doesn't stand apart from the body or the earth, but expresses them in a new way. Consciousness isn't an escape from physicality, but its evolution into new forms of self-relation. This perspective transforms how we understand not just individual consciousness, but collective human knowledge. Science, philosophy, art, and literature aren't merely human inventions separate from nature. They're nature's way of understanding itself through the particular form of human civilization. Have you ever noticed that profound scientific discoveries often feel less like inventions and more like revelations? That mathematical truths seem less created than discovered? Perhaps this feeling points toward Nietzsche's insight, that when we think deeply, we're tapping into patterns that already exist in the fabric of reality. As Nietzsche continued his investigation, a pattern began to emerge, one that connected individual human consciousness to cosmic processes in unexpected ways. This pattern revealed itself through several interlocking insights, each building upon the last. First, Nietzsche recognized that consciousness isn't a static thing, but a process, an activity rather than an entity. In Beyond Good and Evil, 1886, he wrote, "The inner world is full of phantoms and will-o'-the-wisps. The will is one of them. The will no longer moves anything. Consequently, it no longer explains anything. It merely accompanies events. It can also be absent." This radical insight, that even our sense of willing or deciding is not a cause, but an accompaniment to neural processes, has been confirmed by modern neuroscience. Experiments by Benjamin Libet and others have shown that brain activity associated with a decision begins several hundred milliseconds before we become consciously aware of making that decision. Our conscious experience of choosing comes after the neural processes that determine the choice. But rather than diminishing human consciousness, Nietzsche saw this as liberating. If consciousness isn't a supernatural force standing outside nature but a natural process within it, then we can understand it as part of the cosmic order rather than an exception to it. This led to his second insight, that consciousness isn't limited to humans, but exists in various forms throughout nature. In The Gay Science, he speculated, consciousness is really only a net of communication between human beings. It is only as such that it had to develop. A solitary human being who lived like a beast of prey would not have needed it. This suggests something profound. Consciousness evolved as a network, a way of connecting individual organisms. It isn't primarily an individual phenomenon, but a relational one. Recent research in complex systems theory supports this view, suggesting that consciousness emerges from the integration of information across neural networks, not from any single neuron or region. But Nietzsche went further, suggesting in his notebooks that consciousness may be a property of all matter, only in different degrees of organization and complexity. This anticipates modern panpsychist theories, which propose that consciousness might be a fundamental feature of reality, present in some form at all levels of organization. The third insight followed naturally. if consciousness is a process rather than a thing, and if it exists in various forms throughout nature, then human consciousness isn't separate from cosmic processes, but continuous with them. In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Nietzsche wrote, "And do you know what the world is to me? Shall I show it to you in my mirror? This world, a monster of energy, without beginning, without end. This world is the will to power, and nothing besides." With this cryptic statement, Nietzsche was suggesting that the fundamental process underlying both cosmic and human reality is the same, what he called will to power, but which we might today understand as the tendency of complex systems to develop increasing degrees of order, complexity, and self-organization. Modern complexity theory describes how physical systems spontaneously generate order under certain conditions, how atoms form molecules, molecules form cells, cells form organisms, and organisms form societies. Each level of organization builds upon the previous one, creating new forms of complexity. Human consciousness, in this view, isn't separate from this process, but its continuation. The same principle that causes atoms to form molecules and molecules to form cells also causes neurons to form networks capable of self-reflection. The universe doesn't stop organizing itself when it reaches the human brain. It achieves a new level of organization through it. This insight appears in Nietzsche's unpublished notes from 1885. What if the apparent purposiveness in the development of organic beings weren't purposive at all? What if it were merely the consequence of a will to power that is itself evolving within these beings, growing, struggling, conquering? What if self-consciousness were just another stage in the development of a system of power relationships? Here, Nietzsche is suggesting that human consciousness, including our ability to set purposes and goals, emerges from the same fundamental process that drives all cosmic evolution. We don't stand outside this process, directing it according to our conscious purposes. Rather, our conscious purposes are expressions of the process itself. The pattern that emerged from these insights was clear. Human consciousness isn't an anomaly in an otherwise unconscious universe, but a particular expression of properties that exist throughout nature. The universe doesn't suddenly become conscious when it produces humans. Rather, humans represent a specific organization of properties that exist throughout the cosmos. This pattern connects the smallest scales to the largest. The neural networks in your brain mirror the network structure of galaxies in the cosmic web. The information processing in your neurons follows the same physical laws as information processing in stars. The creativity you experience when solving a problem or making art participates in the same creative process that forms solar systems and galaxies. Nietzsche captured this pattern in a note from 1887. The world seen from within, the world described and defined according to its intelligible character, would be just this will to power and nothing else. And you yourselves are also this will to power, and nothing besides. Have you ever had the experience of solving a difficult problem and feeling that the solution was less created than discovered? As if it already existed somewhere, waiting to be found? Perhaps this feeling isn't an illusion, but a glimpse of the deeper pattern Nietzsche uncovered, the pattern that connects your consciousness to cosmic processes. The implications of Nietzsche's discovery extend far beyond abstract philosophy. If human consciousness is the universe achieving self-awareness, then our entire understanding of what it means to be human requires radical revision. First, this perspective transforms how we understand creativity. In the conventional view, creative acts are purely human productions, expressions of individual genius, separate from natural processes. But if Nietzsche is correct, then human creativity participates in cosmic creativity. When a scientist formulates a theory, an artist creates a masterpiece, or anyone has an insight, they're not acting against nature or apart from it. They're nature evolving new forms through human consciousness. This explains why creative breakthroughs often feel less like invention and more like discovery, as if the creator is uncovering something that already existed in potential form. As mathematician Roger Penrose notes, "When I see a mathematical truth, I'm not creating it. I'm discovering something that was already there." Second, this perspective changes our understanding of knowledge. In the conventional view, human knowledge is subjective, separate from the objects it describes. But if human consciousness is the universe achieving self-awareness, then when we truly know something, The universe is knowing itself through us. Modern cognitive science offers intriguing support for this view. When we deeply understand a concept, whether in mathematics, physics, or any domain, our neural representations become isomorphic with the structure of what we're understanding. The patterns in our minds mirror the patterns in reality. Knowledge, at its deepest level, is not representation, but participation. Third, this perspective transforms our understanding of purpose and meaning. In the conventional view, cosmic processes are purposeless, and meaning is something humans impose on an indifferent universe. But if human consciousness is continuous with cosmic processes, then the meaning we create isn't separate from the universe, but the universe creating meaning through us. Nietzsche expressed this insight poetically in Thus Spoke Zarathustra. I teach you the overman. Man is something that shall be overcome. This often misunderstood passage isn't advocating for some kind of biological superiority, but for the recognition that human consciousness is part of an ongoing creative process. Fourth, this perspective transforms our understanding of consciousness itself. Rather than seeing consciousness as something humans have and the rest of the universe lacks, we can understand it as a property that exists in various forms throughout nature. Human consciousness isn't separate from nature, but nature achieving a particular form of self-relation. Finally, this perspective transforms our understanding of humanity's place in the cosmos. Rather than seeing ourselves as accidental byproducts of blind processes, we can understand ourselves as the universe achieving a new phase of evolution, not the endpoint of cosmic processes, but a transition to new forms of complexity, consciousness, and creativity. These implications weren't merely philosophical abstractions for Nietzsche. They represented a profound shift in how humans understand their relationship to the cosmos, a shift with enormous practical consequences for how we live, create, and relate to the world around us. Have you ever considered that your most profound thoughts might not be merely personal productions, but the universe evolving new forms through your consciousness? What might change in how you understand yourself if you took this possibility seriously? If Nietzsche's discovery is so profound, if human consciousness is indeed the universe achieving self-awareness, then why isn't this perspective more widely recognized? The answer reveals a pattern of systematic suppression that serves specific interests and maintains power structures that depend on human separation. The first mechanism of suppression is philosophical dualism, the doctrine that mind and matter are fundamentally different substances. This view creates an artificial barrier between human consciousness and the natural world. By insisting that mind is non-physical, dualism makes it impossible to understand consciousness as a natural phenomenon, continuous with cosmic processes. Nietzsche identified this dualism as the longest error in Twilight of the Idols. The real world has been constructed out of the contradiction to the actual world, an apparent world indeed, insofar as it is merely a moral optical illusion. This philosophical error wasn't merely academic. It served specific theological and political interests by positioning human beings as separate from and superior to nature, as beings with immortal souls distinct from their physical bodies. This separation justified the exploitation of nature and the hierarchical organization of society. The second mechanism of suppression is scientific reductionism, the doctrine that consciousness is merely an epiphenomenon, a side effect of brain processes with no causal significance. This view reduces consciousness to a passive accompaniment of neural activity rather than recognizing it as nature achieving a new form of self-relation. The third mechanism of suppression is economic individualism, the ideology that human beings are fundamentally separate, self-contained individuals competing for resources. This view forms the basis of modern capitalism and depends on obscuring the deep connections between human consciousness and the broader patterns of nature. Nietzsche critiqued this form of individualism in his notebooks. The individual, as we understand it, stands in opposition to the belief in identical individuals. Individual consciousness is not a beginning or end in itself, but a tool and a particular detail of the total life. The fourth mechanism of suppression is educational specialization, the division of knowledge into separate domains with little communication between them. This fragmentation prevents the recognition of patterns that connect human consciousness to cosmic processes. Nietzsche critiqued this fragmentation in Human, All Too Human. Scholars who become specialists don't exactly lie, but the truth they tell is one-sided. They come to resemble factory workers more than thinkers. Modern education continues this pattern. Physics students rarely study consciousness. Psychology students rarely study cosmology. The connections between these fields, the patterns that would reveal the continuity between human consciousness and cosmic processes, remain largely unexplored. Have you ever noticed how our language and education train us to see ourselves as separate from nature? How this separation serves certain economic and political interests? What might change if we recognize the deeper continuity between our consciousness and the cosmos? The suppression of Nietzsche's insight, that human consciousness is the universe achieving self-awareness, serves specific interests and maintains power structures that depend on human separation. To understand this suppression, we must examine who benefits from the illusion of separation and how this illusion is maintained. First, religious institutions have historically depended on positioning themselves as mediators between humanity and the divine. If human consciousness is already continuous with the cosmic order, if the divine is already present within human awareness, then this mediating role becomes unnecessary. Religious hierarchies lose their privileged position as gatekeepers to transcendence. Nietzsche understood this clearly. In The Gay Science, he wrote, "After Buddha was dead, his shadow was still shown for centuries in a cave, a tremendous, gruesome shadow. God is dead. But given the way of men, there may still be caves for thousands of years in which his shadow will be shown." The shadow Nietzsche refers to is the lingering belief in transcendence as something separate from natural processes, something that requires special mediators to access. This belief serves religious authorities by making them necessary for spiritual experience. Second, economic systems based on exploitation of nature depend on humans seeing themselves as separate from the natural world. If we recognize that human consciousness is continuous with natural processes, that we are nature becoming aware of itself, we might be less willing to destroy ecosystems, drive species to extinction, or extract resources without concern for the consequences. Third, political systems based on nationalism depend on people identifying primarily with artificial social categories rather than recognizing their connection to humanity as a whole and to the broader processes of life. If we understood our consciousness as an expression of cosmic processes, national identities might seem less fundamental. Nietzsche was highly critical of nationalism, which was rising in Germany during his lifetime. In Human, All Too Human, he wrote, "Nationalism, this neurosis of modern times, is the fever which has created the national states." He saw nationalism as a narrow identification that prevented recognition of broader patterns of connection. Fourth, consumer culture depends on people seeking fulfillment through acquisition, rather than through recognition of their connection to broader patterns of meaning. If we understood that our consciousness participates in cosmic creativity, we might find fulfillment through creative expression and contemplation rather than consumption, a shift that would threaten industries dependent on continuous growth in consumer spending. These mechanisms of suppression don't constitute a conscious conspiracy in the conventional sense. They're more like systemic patterns that emerge from and reinforce certain power structures. But their effect is the same: to obscure the profound continuity between human consciousness and cosmic processes that Nietzsche discovered. Have you noticed how institutions benefit from keeping us separate from nature and each other? What beliefs or habits have you adopted that reinforce this separation? What might change if more people recognize their consciousness as the universe thinking through them? The journey we've taken through Nietzsche's revolutionary insight leads us to a profound conclusion. You are not merely in the universe is in you. Your consciousness isn't separate from cosmic processes, but is those processes achieving a particular form of self-awareness. When you think, create, and question, you're not acting alone, but participating in the ongoing creativity of the cosmos itself. This isn't mystical speculation, but the logical conclusion of seeing consciousness as a natural phenomenon continuous with other natural processes. Just as the elements in your body were forged in ancient stars, The patterns of your thought participate in patterns that extend throughout the cosmos. Your mind isn't merely yours, it's the universe thinking through you. What does this mean for how you live? First, it suggests that your creative acts, whether artistic, scientific, philosophical, or practical, aren't merely personal expressions, but ways the universe evolves new forms through you. When you create something genuinely new, you're participating in the same creative process that forms galaxies and ecosystems. Second, it suggests that your quest for knowledge isn't merely a personal journey, but the universe coming to know itself through you. When you truly understand something, when you grasp a mathematical proof or comprehend a scientific theory, the separation between knower and known momentarily dissolves. The universe knows itself through your knowing. Third, it suggests that meaning isn't something you impose on an indifferent cosmos, but something you discover through recognizing your continuity with cosmic processes. Your life has meaning not because you give it meaning, but because it participates in the ongoing creativity of the universe itself. Nietzsche captured this insight in The Gay Science, when he wrote, "The most important of more recent events, that God is dead, that the belief in the Christian God has become unbelievable, is already starting to cast its first shadows over Europe. What follows this shadow isn't nihilism, but a new recognition of meaning embedded in natural processes themselves, processes in which human consciousness actively participates. This recognition transforms not just how we think, but how we live. If your consciousness is the universe thinking through you, then how will you use this extraordinary capacity? Will you allow your awareness to be consumed by trivialities, or will you direct it toward what truly matters? Creation, understanding, connection, and joy? The choice is yours, but it's not merely a personal choice. It's the universe choosing through you. When you dedicate yourself to creative work that matters, when you seek understanding of the world around you, when you foster meaningful connections with others, you're not just improving your life. You're participating in the evolution of consciousness itself. This is the final revelation. You matter not because you're separate from the cosmos, but because you're continuous with it. Your thoughts, creations, and choices aren't merely personal. They're cosmic events, ways the universe unfolds through the particular form of your consciousness. If this perspective resonates with you, if you felt the truth of it in those moments, when the boundary between your awareness and what you're aware of momentarily dissolves, then join us in exploring its implications. Like this video if it's illuminated something for you. Subscribe to continue this philosophical investigation, and share your experiences in the comments. Have you ever felt that your deepest insights weren't entirely yours, that they came through you rather than from you? Together, we're not just sharing ideas, we're participating in the ongoing evolution of consciousness itself. We're the universe thinking through each other, recognizing patterns that connect us to the cosmic whole. What could be more meaningful than that?